In 1939, two military teams marched toward the same mountain in western Tibet. They had no idea the other existed. One team was German, funded by the SS. They came back with crates full of materials that are still locked in classified archives today. The other team was Soviet, 12 men, elite, trained for field operations in extreme conditions. 5 came home. The other 7 are listed in Soviet records as missing in action, location unknown. No bodies were found, no distress signal was recorded, no explanation was ever given. That happened in 1939, and it is the least strange thing about this mountain. Western Tibet, 14,800 feet above sea level. Winter temperatures hit negative 40 degrees. In summer, the UV radiation is so intense it burns through clothing. Oxygen runs at half the level your body needs to think clearly. This is one of the most remote and hostile places on the inhabited surface of this planet. Rocky plains that stretch for days with nothing. A few monasteries, nomadic camps separated by weeks of walking, and rising out of all of it, one mountain, 6,638 meters tall, 4 faces, a razor peak. And here is the first fact that stops scientists cold. Not a single glacier on its slopes. Every mountain around it covered in ice. Kailash stands completely bare. Nobody has a clean explanation for why. Its name is Mount Kailash. And 4 completely separate religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and the ancient Tibetan faith of Bon, each arrived at the same conclusion about this mountain independently, without contact with each other. They all called it the axis of the world, and nobody has ever reached the summit, not because it is technically impossible. In 1999, a climbing team received official Chinese permission to attempt it. 4 religious organizations that had never cooperated on anything in their entire histories, filed simultaneous protests. The permit was revoked in days. The mountain has never been climbed, and some very powerful people intend to keep it that way. Look at any mountain in the Himalayas, jagged, asymmetrical, chaotic. That is what mountains look like. Nature does not use a ruler, except here. Kailash has 4 faces. Each one deviates from a perfect flat plane by less than 1%. The north face points exactly north. The east face points exactly east. The margin of error across all 4 sides is less than 2 degrees. But no other peak in the entire Himalayan range shows anything like this. Geologists have a term for it. They say the rock cracks in uniform directions, causing uniform weathering. Fine, that can explain 1 symmetrical face, maybe 2, but 4 faces, all perfectly flat, all perfectly aligned to the 4 compass directions, with less than 2 degrees of error total. That has never been documented anywhere else on Earth. It is not in any geology textbook, because no textbook has a second example to compare it to. Now, here is where it gets harder to dismiss. A Russian researcher named Ernst Muldashev led multiple expeditions to Kailash in the 1990s. He measured the angle of its faces and found something that the academic world quietly ignored. The angle of Kailash's faces is almost identical to the angle of the faces of the Great Pyramid of Giza. He also noted that the rock on the outer surface of each face looks visually different from the rock inside the cracks and crevices, as if the outer shell is a separate layer of material. Mainstream science did not refute this. It did not publish a counter-measurement. It said nothing. And silence from a field that runs on published debate is its own kind of answer. Every year, tens of thousands of pilgrims walk the Kora, the ritual path that circles the base of Kailash. The full route takes 3 days, and for centuries, people completing that walk have reported the same thing. Their hair and nails grew at the rate of 2 full weeks of normal growth, in 3 days. That is not a spiritual metaphor. That is a physically measurable result. Pilgrims measured their nail length before starting and immediately after finishing. The increase was equivalent to 2 weeks of growth, every time. You will find this recorded in Tibetan chronicles going back hundreds of years, in the field diaries of British military officers who surveyed this region in the 1800s, in the personal notebooks of Soviet geologists who worked near Kailash in the 1960s, and in expedition reports from research teams in the 2000s. One source is a story. One era is a coincidence. A consistent pattern across 150 years from unconnected sources in different languages, from people who had never read each other's notes. That is data. A Soviet scientist named Nikolai Kozyrev spent decades building a theory around this kind of anomaly. He argued that time is not a fixed constant, that in specific physical environments, time itself can run faster or slower at a measurable rate. His work was classified by the Soviet government. Parts of it were only released after the USSR collapsed. His experiments with spinning gyroscopes in different locations on Earth produced results that nobody could explain. Reproducible, documented, anomalous results. Nobody has explained them. Not then, not now. Biologists offer a simpler answer. Altitude, extreme UV radiation, physical exertion, and changes in diet can push the body to produce cells faster. That is a reasonable explanation. But here is the problem with it. The acceleration was not recorded uniformly across the entire 3-day route. Multiple expedition members noted it happened at specific points, specific locations around the mountain, and not at others. Zones, hotspots, places where something changes. Nobody has been permitted to study them directly. Before we go further, I want to ask you something directly. We have covered 2 sites, an impossible geometry and a time anomaly documented across 150 years. Do you think there is a rational explanation for both of these? Or do you think something else is going on here? Type rational or something else in the comments right now. I read every single one. And stay until the end, because what I am about to show you in the next 10 minutes is the reason 2 superpowers sent military teams to this mountain in the same year. On the western slope of Kailash, there are rock formations with a deeply concave surface, not random hollows, not scattered pits. Systematic shapes appearing at multiple levels up the slope, each with similar angles and similar dimensions. Multiple research teams from different countries, working in different decades, describe them the same way. Parabolic dishes, like satellite receivers, carved directly into the face of the mountain. A parabolic shape has one specific property. It takes energy, light, sound, radiation, and focuses it into a single point. Muldashev proposed that these rock formations were doing exactly that, concentrating solar energy or geomagnetic energy or acoustic frequency into precise points at the mountain's base. In his model, this is what creates the time acceleration zones. The shapes are lenses. The foot of the mountain is the focal point. The official geological answer is simpler. Soft rock weathers faster than hard rock, creating hollows. That is a real process. Nobody disputes it exists. But that process has never, on any neighboring peak in the same rock type under the same conditions, produced a regular, multi-level, systematically repeating pattern of parabolic shapes. Nobody has measured what happens to electromagnetic signals inside these formations. Nobody has measured the acoustic resonance, The permits do not allow it. The shapes sit on the western slope, looking out over the valley, unchanged for at least 1,000 years. In 1962, a Soviet geologist named Alexei Voronov was part of a mapping expedition in western Tibet. He was not looking for anomalies. He was doing routine work, documenting rock formations, recording coordinates, taking measurements. When his team reached the southern face of Kailash, he stopped. He wrote in his field notebook that he stood looking at the wall for a long time before he wrote anything down. Then he wrote, "The grooves do not make sense. I have no category for this." On the southern wall of Kailash, starting at about 16,000 feet, there are vertical furrows running straight down the face of the rock, long, parallel, approximately uniform in width, extending from near the summit toward the base. From a distance, they look like something massive ran tools down the face from top to bottom. Here is what geology tells us. Erosion actually looks like. Water erosion follows terrain. The channels spread out, branch, vary in width. Glacial scratches run in the direction the ice moved, not straight down. Thermal cracking creates irregular, branching fractures. What is on the southern wall of Kailash is strictly vertical, parallel, consistent. And it has been documented by geologists from multiple countries since the 19th century. Not one published field study with direct measurements exists in the public record. No drilling, no core samples, no formal analysis. Voronov's notebook sat in a Soviet archive for 30 years before anyone outside his institution read it. When a researcher finally did, they found the same description that half a dozen other geologists had already written, independently, without knowing about each other. The same formation, the same confusion, the same absence of answers. 100 kilometers north of Kailash, the cliffs rise straight up from the valley floor, 50 feet, 100 feet. In some places, 150 feet of sheer vertical rock. And in those cliffs, there are doors, about 10,000 of them, cut into the rock face at heights that have no stairs leading to them, no rope marks worn into the stone below, no broken remnants of wooden scaffolding, no carved footholds, just a vertical wall and doors in it, at heights that modern climbers can only reach by descending from a helicopter on a rope. When Nepalese and American archaeologists started doing exactly that in the 1990s, dropping in from above, here is what they found inside. Sanskrit and Tibetan manuscripts between 500 and 1200 years old. Paintings on the walls in a Buddhist style that does not match any known artistic school from that period or region. Mummified human remains in seated meditation positions. And one skeleton, carbon dated to the 2nd century BC, 2,300 years ago, before any organized state officially existed in this region, before any written record mentions a population here capable of building structures like these. Someone was here. Someone carved 10,000 rooms into vertical cliffs. Someone carried bodies up to heights that require modern helicopter access. Someone lived here, or worshipped here, or hid here, and then vanished without leaving a single account of how they did any of it. Most of the 10,000 caves remain unexplored. Permits are issued one at a time. Access is restricted. Funding disappears. The work moves at a pace that makes no sense given what has already been found inside. 100 kilometers west of Kailash, carved into a rock massif at nearly 12,000 feet, there is a city. Not ruins. A city. Palaces with painted walls, monasteries with sculptures still standing inside them, defensive walls, residential neighborhoods, and beneath all of it, underground galleries connecting everything like a hidden network. Its name is Zaparang. It was the capital of the Guge Kingdom. At its peak, around 100,000 people lived here, their own currency, trade routes. A school of Buddhist painting that art historians still reference today. In 1630, a Portuguese Jesuit priest named Antonio de Andrade became the first European to reach it. He described it as rich, crowded, and alive. Within 40 years of that description, silence. When 19th century explorers reached Tsaparang, they found it perfectly preserved. Frescoes on the walls, statues intact, cooking vessels still sitting in the ground, and in the underground galleries, hundreds of skeletons, men, women, children. No signs of plague, no evidence of fire, no destruction consistent with the scale of death found in those tunnels. The official history says this. In 1635, a neighboring kingdom invaded. The royal family was captured. The population fled. Then, who are the hundreds of people in the underground galleries? Why didn't they leave? The lower levels of the underground system have not been systematically excavated. Access to the site is restricted under the reason of preservation. Nobody says what is on the levels that have not been opened. 100,000 people built a civilization here. Within a generation, not one was left to explain what happened. The city still stands. The galleries still hold their dead. And the part of the site that might contain the answer is behind a locked gate. At the southern foot of Kailash, two lakes sit next to each other, separated by a strip of land so narrow you can walk across it in minutes. Same altitude, 14,900 feet. Same rainfall, same surrounding rock, same source water flowing from the same mountain range. They should be identical. They are complete opposites. The first lake is called Manasarovar. Fresh water, crystal clear, deep blue. Fish, birds, plant life. Pilgrims travel weeks to bathe in it. Tibetan texts call it the living lake and say its water heals. The second lake is called Rakshastal. Salt water, dark, almost no birds, almost no fish, almost no life. Locals call it the Dead Lake, or the Lake of Demons. Pilgrims do not go near it. There is no published scientific explanation for why two lakes at the same altitude, fed by the same source, with the same geology, have fundamentally different salt compositions. Between them runs a narrow natural channel. Tibetan chronicles recorded something specific about it. When the living lake rises high enough to send water through the channel into the dead lake, it marks the beginning of a period of great change. Historians who have reviewed those texts found that the channel flowed during periods that preceded significant events in regional history. The correlation is documented, it is not explained. At night, multiple researchers have observed a faint blue-green glow in the water of Manasarovar. Bioluminescent algae has been suggested. No systematic study has ever been conducted. Kailash rises above both lakes, 6,500 meters, looking down at one that lives and one that does not, and saying nothing. If you have made it this far, you already know this channel is not going to give you easy answers. We are going to give you the real questions that nobody else is asking. Hit subscribe right now, because next week we are going into a location 200 miles from here, where 3 separate military expeditions turned back without explanation. One of them left footage. That footage was declassified last year. We have it. Subscribe so you do not miss that. And drop a comment right now. Which of these 7 sites do you think is the most important? Which one, if fully investigated, would change what we know about human history the most? Tell me. I will respond. Northwest of Kailash, there is an area that the Tibetans call the Black Peak. on Chinese government maps, maps that include detailed topographic data for every surrounding valley, every ridge, every neighboring mountain. This zone is a white rectangle, no elevation lines, no labels, no coordinate grid, a blank space. Deliberately left blank. In an era when you can pull up commercial satellite imagery of any point in the Himalayas on your phone in 30 seconds, this section of the official map is simply shaded out. Explorers who have tried to approach this zone from multiple directions across multiple decades describe the same sequence of events. Compasses begin giving contradictory readings. GPS devices freeze or record coordinates that do not match where the person actually is. Mechanical watches, not electronic mechanical, begin losing measurable time after a few hours inside the zone, then return to accurate time after the explorer leaves. This is documented in expedition diaries from the early 20th century. Before GPS existed, before any of this was a topic that people wrote about online. In the 1960s and 1970s, Soviet geophysicists running classified programs in this region recorded anomalous geomagnetic readings with a clear spatial pattern, pointing not at any mountain, but at a fixed point in space. Some of those reports were released after the USSR collapsed. Others are still classified. One scientist who participated in a technical expedition in this area gave a single interview in the early 1990s. He was asked what his team found. He paused for a long time before answering. Then he said, "We were informed that the matter had been resolved at a level above our clearance." He did not know what had been decided, or he could not say which. He died 3 years after that interview. The recording exists. The full transcript has never been published. Now we come back to 1939. Europe is 7 days from the start of World War II. The entire world is holding its breath. And 2 military expeditions are moving toward Kailash simultaneously, without knowledge of each other. The German team is led by a zoologist named Ernst Schaefer. The funding comes through SS organizational channels. The official mission is documented as Nature and Ethnography Research in Tibet. They returned with every man alive and crates of materials. A significant portion of those materials remain unclassified in German federal archives to this day. Researchers who have requested access have been denied. The Soviet team, 12 men. The mission objective is classified. The location they were sent to, classified. What they were looking for, classified. 5 men came home. 7 are listed as missing in action, operational assignment, location unknown. No bodies, no last recorded position, no explanation filed with any family. 2 of the most powerful governments on Earth, the same mountain, the same year, racing toward the same place without knowing the other was coming. What were they both looking for? There is no answer in any document that has ever been released to the public. Whatever both teams were chasing, one group found it and brought it home. The other group found something else entirely. Kailash stands today exactly as it stood 3,000 years ago. 4 faces. A sharp peak. No footprint above base camp in the entire recorded history of the mountain. Every year, thousands of people walk the path around it. Not one attempts the summit, not because it is forbidden by law, because something about this place has held firmer than any law, any army, and any government for 5,000 years. And every institution with the power to study it has either been refused access or has come back with answers they will not share. 8 sites, 8 open questions, and the people positioned to answer them are not talking. Which of the 8 hit you the hardest? drop the number in the comments, 1 through 8, and tell me, do you think China will ever allow a full, open scientific investigation of Kailash in our lifetime? Yes or no? Let's find out what this audience actually believes. I'll see you in the next one.